Okay, so we'll get started. Welcome to Faith in Action Practicing Biblical Advocacy Letter Writing webinar. So thank you folks from West End CRC in Edmonton for helping us pilot this and start it out. And as we only have the hour here, we'll get started pretty quick. So I'm Cindy Stover. And I work for the Office of Social Justice here in Canada. I work for the Centre for Public Dialogue and a number of other justice-related ministries in Canada that focus on bearing witness to God's justice in the world. And I'm joined by Melissa. Melissa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Just to start out, can you hear me okay, or is it choppy?
Fine.
Okay. Sometimes I have trouble when my camera is on, so please just let me know if there's any trouble. So yes, I am Melissa Steck. I am joining you all from Grand Rapids, Michigan. I work for the Christian Reformed Church Office of Social Justice, doing a similar capacity of work that Cindy does in Canada. I'm here to equip churches to do justice in their faith communities and broader communities. So happy to be here today. Mm-hmm. And looks like Lucinda is joining.
Hi there.
Welcome.
Hi, Lucinda.
Hi, Lucinda.
Hi, all.
We're just doing introductions.
Okay.
And just to let you know, we are recording this, so you're being recorded. We might share this on YouTube or one of our CRC Justice channels. So just so you're aware. Awesome. So we're just going to get started so that we can get through this hour pretty quick. Melissa and I are going to share a little bit in the beginning to talk about what we're called to do in terms of biblical justice, and then we're going to get right into actually the activity of writing these letters. So first question, has everyone received the workbook that I sent out, the PDF or Word document that you can type along with us if you open it up on your computer, or if you've printed it off. That's a great way to follow along, because essentially we're going to go through the different sections and there'll be time for you to actually fill in some of the sections. So just want to make sure you all have access to that. Thumbs up if you do, or nodding heads if you do.
Right there. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that to get started. Melissa.
Yes.
Oh, nope, sorry. I'm just looking at the different spots we had. I'm going to quickly share my screen for the presentation, and then we're going to work through that. I'm going to start off by playing a video that will share a little bit about our call to do justice. So is that good with everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, we've done our introductions. I'll play this.
I think we have incredible models of advocates in Scripture. I think Moses is one of the most clear. Moses was called by God to go to the political leader of Egypt, Pharaoh, and let the people go. I don't think we should take Moses' calling as the only response God had to the people of Israel at the time. I think, given what we know of God through the whole of Scripture and the character of God, that God called brave saints to go and to minister to the Israelites in their captivity, to feed them, to bandage their wounds, to be in relationship and take care of each other. But Moses' unique calling was this advocate to go to the political leader of the day and set the people free. So Moses is a huge inspiration for those of us who want to live justly. Esther is an incredible example of a woman who came from the marginalized people but was able to rise to a place of privilege where she was the spouse of the king, and at great risk to herself, she put herself on the line to save a people who were going to be wiped out. That's an incredible testimony to us as how we pursue advocacy. It rises from people in oppression. It lifts up the people who themselves are oppressed. Those of us who come from privilege join them, we stand with them, but advocacy emerges from those places. There are people around the world, brothers and sisters in Christ, standing up against injustice at great personal risk to themselves, and we should always be in solidarity with them, in prayer with them, encouraging them.
Thanks for playing that, Cindy.
Yeah, that's just a video from the Live Justly small group curriculum. If that's interesting to you, let me know later and we can share more about that. I just wanted to share a little bit about what, why we're called as Christians to do advocacy and do justice. And some of these examples were talked about in that video, but we just want to, start off by reiterating that, yes, we know that this is part of our calling. This is a spiritual discipline that we can practice as Christians. And so that's why we offer this kind of training. So Melissa, do you want to get started with the next section?
Yes. All right. So yes, thank you, Cindy, for that introduction. And though we are not exactly like Moses in that we are called from a burning bush, or we're not married to the king, we are still able to do our part. We are still called to do this work and to do advocacy. So thanks for joining us in learning a little bit more about letter writing. So before we dive into the actual content of writing the letter and the logistics of writing the letter, we need to figure out, or each of us figure out, what exactly we would want to write our elected officials about. What is that justice issue? So again, we're trying to identify what justice issue we want to speak up on. So if you could spend a moment to think about what societal injustice you feel passionate about. What is something that upsets you that you want to speak up on? What problems or harms are you passionate about changing in society? And if you're not sure, if there's an issue that you're like, well, there's a lot of things, I don't know exactly what to pick. There was a link to our Hear Us Out, Do Justice blog. Is that something you wanted to reference still, Cindy, as like an example of issues?
Yeah, I can put that in the chat box. Right now, this is just the American talking points that the OSJ has provided. We were hoping to have the Canadian ones ready, but there's been a bit of a hiccup in getting that done in time for this webinar, but I'll put the link here for the US one, and people can use that as talking points about refugees and immigration, or about climate care, or different areas like that to get started with, if you're having trouble thinking of what areas you'd want to speak up about on your own. But if you already know what you want to talk about, that's fine. You can already have decided that.
Yeah, of course. But just to get your brain going, if you need that for a moment, to see some of the issue areas outlined in that blog post. But so yeah, if you already have, I'd love to open this up to hear from each of you. So if you could unmute yourself, if you're not already, I'd love to hear from each of you. What is a social justice issue that you are passionate about, that you would like to write your letter about today?
I'll go first. And it's something we've heard about for a period of time, but I heard it again on Saturday, and it's about getting clean water on the reserves, especially in northern Canada.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that they do not have drinkable water is, obviously we have major concerns during this time of pandemic, but that is definitely a justice issue and needs to be addressed.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Shall I try? We have a premier by the name of Jason Kenney, who has just announced here in northern Alberta that he wants to give lots of money to the oil industry up here. We don't exactly put out the cleanest product, and caring a little bit about the environment and God's good creation, I would love to see our MLA, our member for the Legislative Assembly, who is an NDP, to hold Mr. Kenney's foot to the fire a little bit about renewables and supporting renewables as much or more then he's supporting the oil industry. I think that this is an opportunity almost unique where we can really begin to shift things towards renewables and away from what really is not a very clean product.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. Who wants to go next?
I don't know, am I unmuted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You're
We
good.
can hear you.
I hadn't really come prepared with a specific issue,
That's okay.
but what comes to mind for me is similar to what Margot had talked about, just about maybe more in our urban center of the poverty and food insecurity we see disproportionately amongst our Indigenous, or the Indigenous people that are a part of our community. And so specifically, we do see that around our church congregation, around West End's physical space as well. So advocating for some of the policy changes that are also coming into place from our provincial government. That's what comes to mind for me. I'm a social worker and have worked in children's services for a long time. So I've seen that kind of inequality, and there are also new policy changes coming from our current provincial government that have the potential to have a really negative impact for children that have been in the foster care system, and those children are disproportionately Indigenous. So.
Thanks for sharing.
I had not come prepared with an actual issue, partly because I came to listen to the webinar more as simply an observer. So with my role in diaconal ministries, I came more to listen as to how to share this with other deacons and diaconates in the Edmonton area churches, so that I can present to them the ideas that are available to them. So like I said, I came more just as an observer.
Okay,
So
yeah, that's
I
great.
will learn.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we'll go through the different sections and you can participate as it makes sense to you then.
Cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna re-share my screen just to do some of the letter writing stuff. There, you can all see that.
Yes.
Yep.
So we're going to get right into the concept of letter writing. As you can see here on the screen, and also likely on, there we go, on page 4 in your workbooks, we actually have an outline of what a typical letter would look like. We've found that in our work, both in Canada and the US, we've found that having a personalized letter, something that is more than just a form or a template that you sign at the bottom and send it off, is actually quite a bit more effective. Not to say that the action alerts and other things that we do aren't effective, but those are more so for, if you are focused on a justice issue that matters very deeply to you, it makes sense to be a bit more personalized with it, as opposed to the action alerts that we send. They're helpful and are high volume, but aren't necessarily always the thing that you really want to get in there and focus on with your elected officials about. We definitely find that, sort of, as we say here, a well-framed and sincere email, or even a mailed letter, printed off and mailed, or handwritten and mailed, that reflects your personality and your real concerns, is actually probably the most effective means of written communication. We also really think that, a letter is a beginning of a relationship with your elected official. We highly encourage people to actually pursue in-person meetings with them. Obviously, that's a bit difficult right now in the middle of the pandemic. But as we figure out new ways of connecting, and maybe there's opportunities for Zoom meetings with elected officials, or maybe setting meetings for the fall or next year, we really encourage people to use this webinar and use this letter writing as a first step. in hopefully what might become a longer relationship of advocacy with your elected officials. But today, what we're doing is actually working on writing these letters in real time during this webinar. So we're going to work through this workbook you have in front of you and go step by step through each section paragraph of this letter. So by the time we're done at the end of the hour, you'll actually have the letter written in the workbook and just need to copy it over to have a good copy of that. So yeah, Melissa, do you want to take over from here?
Yes, and yes, sorry, I'm confused because I thought I was doing that part. But
I just didn't see the note. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We're learning as we go, folks.
Yeah.
So yes, yeah, so I used to work for a member of Congress, as you might have seen in in the U.S. context, obviously, Parliament versus Congress. But yeah, I can attest personally to the fact that personal letters, either handwritten or emails drafted using your own language, are some of the most compelling messages. And that constituents really are their concerns are really taken into heart and mind in a elected official's decision making. So yeah, so as you can see up on the screen here, just the structure of the letter. So hopefully you are on page 4 of your workbook. When we get through, we'll go through the structure of the letter here. Cindy will help with the process of figuring out who you're writing this to. The first paragraph is capturing your key message. So outlining what exactly you want to be changed. And second paragraph, which I would argue is the most important paragraph from my experience as someone that read these letters, is your personal experience or why you care. I think especially with this paragraph and given that you are constituents, not necessarily someone from a think tank or a policy expert or whatever, the biggest, most important thing that you have to offer is your experience and your personal passion. So I just want to reiterate that. I know Cindy's going to talk more about it, but just to articulate that more specifically. Third paragraph is the call to action. Your ask for what the elected official can do, what you'd like for them to do. And fourth paragraph, more details on the issue, how or why this issue is important and urgent. And then closing out with a thank you and request for a response. And then we'll talk briefly about how you could attach a one-page brief. So yeah, so we're gonna break down each of those paragraphs and each of the parts of the letter more specifically now. So Cindy, my notes here indicate that Cindy will walk us through who it's addressed to and then paragraphs 1 through 3.
Yeah, I will take over from here. Sorry, the problem is I can't actually see the video of anyone, so I can't see how you're reacting.
Yeah, tricky.
So yeah, the first step really, the top of the letter is to, who are you actually addressing this to? So I'm gonna quickly stop the share here so I can look at you. Now, some of you talked about provincial issues and some of you talked about federal issues. So that's probably the most important thing to figure out to begin with. Is it who are you going to be talking to or addressing your letter to depends on whether it's a local, town, or city issue, so that's municipal, whether it's a provincial issue, or whether it's a nationwide issue and therefore a federal issue. So if you can just think for a moment in your head what level of influence you're wanting to connect to about this particular issue. And then once you've figured that out, you can find out whether it's a municipal person you want to write your letter to, whether it's something to do with affordable housing in your city, and you want to talk to your city council, or whether it's a provincial issue. I know, Bob, you mentioned you were wanting to address your MLA, your member of legislative assembly in Alberta, so that's your provincial level. And then federal is an MP, that's a federal member of parliament in Ottawa. And so that would be an individual who is responsible for federal issues, which, Margot, as you talked about, Indigenous issues and boil water advisories, that's actually a federal issue because the Aboriginal or Indigenous affairs is funded through the federal government as opposed to provincial governments in most cases. So that would be the level of government you'd be addressing that to. So I'm going to quickly show you how you would find the member of parliament. Well, first of all, do you all know who you would be addressing your letter to right now? Show of hands. Okay. But for the sake of Lucinda, because I know you are wanting to share this with others, so I'm going to share my screen and show you how to identify your, at least your federal member of parliament, if you are desiring to do that. So I'll share this screen. So if you're looking for your federal representative, you would go to ourcommons.ca, and I'm just going to quickly show you how to do that. I have to spell it right. So if I want to look up my MP, I'm going to do that here in Hamilton. I'm going to hit the search bar. I'm going to look up L8L2A5. That is my postal code. And sorry, I should have done that. Member for that postal code, and that should bring up my MP. It should. There we go. So my MP is Matthew Green, NDP member for Hamilton Centre. If I click on that and scroll down to his contact page, this actually has his email address, his mailing address, telephone, all of the information I need to contact him either in Ottawa or his constituency office here in Hamilton. Ideally, if you're sending letter mail to a federal minister, it's good to send it to Ottawa because it's free to put it in the mail. So this is the address it would be for anyone that you're sending to a federal official. Now, if you're wanting to send it to a provincial official, you would just do the same thing. You would look up with your postal code, but look up who your MLA or your MPP is in the same way. So does that make sense to everyone? Can I get a, because I can't see you, can I get a yes from folks?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to move on to actually starting our paragraphs, our first and second paragraphs. So this is where we're going to start out with the 3 W's. So this is, we're trying to sort of use cool ways to remember this stuff so it's easy to remember the next time you go to do it. So we're going to narrow down your justice issue and help you develop a focused message of what you want to see changed. So the first paragraph is really focused on, you know, there's an issue in the world that I want to have dealt with, and this is, you know, identifying what it is and what needs to change about it. So we go through the 3 W questions. What is the problem? Why do you care? And what is the solution? So for example, if we're talking about affordable housing, in my city here in Hamilton, there's a lot of people who don't have access to housing. There's a housing shortage. There's also a lot of gentrification happening. So there are houses that are getting bought up and flipped and sold for a lot of money that puts them completely out of the price range of people who have lower incomes. And so the problem in Hamilton for housing is that there's just a lack of affordable housing. And if you are on, let's see, page 6 here of your workbook, there are a couple other questions you can see there to help you identify what the problem is. Now, why do I care? The second question, why do I care about affordable housing? Well, I care because there are people in my neighborhood who don't have access to affordable housing. I care because there are people who I care about, my friends and family members who are on fixed incomes, who might be on government assistance, for example, who cannot afford to just go get a condo for $2,000 a month. That's not in their price range. It's not even in my price range, let's be honest. But I care because there are valuable people who I care about, but are also image bearers who are having trouble finding safe and sustainable housing. And then the third question, what is the solution? I think the solution is that there should actually be more government regulated affordable housing units in developments that are happening in Hamilton. So I don't know if, like, you guys live in Edmonton, it's a pretty urban area. You probably see a lot of condo developments, a lot of buildings going up all over the place like we do here in Hamilton. And it is within the power of city council or within the provincial government to say there need to be a minimum number of affordable units in those buildings going up. And so that's what I think would be the solution if I were to go to my MP. So does that kind of make sense, those three questions? Is that something that you all feel comfortable being able to go through? We're going to give you a few minutes each to go through and answer those questions in your workbook. I would say we should go until 3:35 or 1:35 Mountain Time to have you go through and answer those questions about the particular issue. And then at the end, we want you to create a key message. So take what you have answered for those three questions and summarize it into one key message that should be no more than 1 to 3 sentences long. You'll see that it's probably the 3 sentences answering those questions, and takes no more than 30 seconds to say out loud. And then when we're done, we'll ask you to share, a few of you to share your key sentences. So does everyone feel thumbs up, able to do that in the next 6 to 7 minutes? Cool. So you can mute yourself or whatever. I'm going to mute myself so that if I make a strange noise, it won't interrupt you. So we'll go until 3:35. Okay, my clock says 3:35. If you're ready to come back. Are there a few of you who would want to unmute yourself and share the key message that you've worked on so far?
Do you want me to try it?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I'm trying to get my first paragraph, and I thought it was important to say that I was talking to on behalf of more than just myself.
Mm-hmm.
I think politicians always like to hear that there's more than one voter at stake. So I started this way. Dear Ms. Sigurdsson, she is our Edmonton Riverview MLA. Together with many of my congregants, I care deeply about the future of our planet and the well-being of future generations, including my 8 grandchildren. In Alberta, we have a key responsibility and opportunity to move from production of fossil fuels to renewables. I was very distressed to hear that our Premier has announced massive financial supports to the oil sands sector and has made no similar commitments to supporting our efforts to build our capacity of developing green energy. We have an unparalleled opportunity at this moment of kickstarting the economy by stimulating growth in companies offering renewables and retraining laid-off oil workers to rejoin the workforce in an area that will continue to grow exponentially as the renewed economy will no longer tolerate dirty oil and finds ways of converting from it. Now I need to shorten all those sentences.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good content, obviously. And it helps to have that much information to start with, because we're going to go into another section to create more content. I'm assuming not everyone has as much content to start off with as you do. So that's good. It's good to go. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section. I'll ask somebody else to share the next section. But if you want to move now to page 9, this is going to be the 3rd paragraph, the 3 H's and your call to action. So this is where you're going to talk about what you want your elected official to do. So you've, in the 3, in your key message with the answers to the 3 H's, or the 3 W's, you've been able to identify what the problem is and what you think the solution is. So now you're going to frame that in a way that says what you want your elected official to do about the problem. So these questions are going to follow a similar format, just starting with an H instead of a W. So how does your issue matter? You know, what is something that matters about your issue to your elected official? Why should they care? Why does it matter to people in their constituency? Is it something they've opposed or supported in the past? So where does this issue fit in the context of the person you're talking to? And then the second question, how can they take action? What is it that you actually are asking them to do? What's a very specific thing? Are you wanting them to introduce a new law or a policy or change something that exists? Do you want them to influence their peers? Do you want them to increase or decrease funding? Or do you want them to investigate an unjust situation? So again, what Bob just shared, he has already answered a few of these questions, you know, wanting to ensure that funding is not just going to oil and gas companies to continue operating status quo, but funding be issued towards just transition into green economies. So that's sort of answering that question there. And then the final question is, how can they help you? So sometimes you might not have all the answers to everything. Sometimes you might not know why the government has done a particular thing or gone in a certain direction with some policy. They might be able to help you understand why the government has made the choice that they have. They might be able to help you understand how to navigate the political system. Maybe you don't know who the right person is to ask about your issue, so you want to ask your MP first, and they'll direct you to the Minister of Women and Girls or something like that. And finally, can they refer you to other elected officials? So don't feel like you have to have all the answers right away. You might actually need to ask them for support. And one note we put here, when you're asking them what they can do, make sure that it's something that they can realistically say yes to. Make sure it's something that is within the realm of their influence. If you're asking them to, I don't even know what's, to do something astronomically outside of their responsibilities, if you're asking them to sever our ties with the Queen of England or something like that, then that's probably outside of their realm of influence. And also, I like the Queen. I think she's lovely. So it might be difficult for them to have influence on that. So make sure that when you're crafting your call to action, that you're actually asking them for something they can do, or that they at least have the ability to influence their peers to do. So we're gonna go through this section again, take a few minutes for you to create your call to action. So you're gonna answer these 3 questions, the 3 H's. And by answering those questions, then on page 11, you will come to be able to summarize those answers and write your call to action. So it should be about 3 to 5 sentences long. So it'll be a little bit longer than the previous message, but still only take about 1 or 2 minutes to say out loud, because we want to make sure, again, that it's clear, it's concise, and it's something that you can easily remember and respond to. So I'm going to look at you all again. Was that clear to everyone? Does everyone feel like you know what you're being asked to do in the workbook? So we're going to give you, again, about, oh goodness, we've got 20 minutes left. So I'm probably going to give you 5 minutes to work on that instead of 10. So we're going to go to 3:46, if that's okay. And no pressure if you're not finished. You can keep working on it after the webinar is done. So I'll give you 5 minutes to work on this and go.
I have a question, Cindy, and I hope it's not interrupting everybody else's processing their letters. 2 of the things that come to mind when I'm dealing with deacons is that I could see there would be a number of people who would want to do something or would be willing to get their feet wet, but they don't have a large enough grasp of the issue. Say, for example, affordable housing. So they go, sure, I'm willing to write a letter, but when you ask me these questions, I go, I don't know, I don't understand, I don't get it. This person says one thing and that person says another. Is there maybe some way, and maybe then the form letter is a more doable possibility, but I could see that sadly, predominantly the deacons that I work with would go, yeah, this is a bit much for me, I'm not getting in there. The second question that I have is, they see various sides to an issue. So like I said, the first one, say the affordable housing one, I could see a number of people just going, I wouldn't even know where to start on this. Sure, I think it's an issue that my municipal or even provincial leaders should know something about, but not that they would be able to get into it. And so they would, quite frankly, throw the whole project out because they'd be like, I don't know, it just kind of overwhelms me. So that would be the one area. And then, so like I said, the second area about the letter writing, to me, I would hear a number of them go, but Pastor Bob, I don't have an issue with the government, and I don't have an issue with the provincial government's plan. I do see we need to do something in creation care, no doubt about it, but they would see a different side to it, or they would see only, say, a portion of the question. So how would I help them address letter writing, or say, no, but it still is important, it still is essential that we are in contact with our government leaders, but I'm just not as passionate as, the people leading my project are, or I don't even agree with them fully. So I didn't mean to interrupt everybody's letter writing, but I figured that is certainly the area that I see when I address deacons.
Yeah. I would say, in answer to the second question first, yeah, not everyone is always going to be on the same page about everything, and that's fine. I've done these workshops in person in churches where there's a table of people and everyone around that table is writing about a different issue, or just disagreeing about that issue, and that's fine, because advocacy is in some ways a personal issue in terms of, like, I feel morally that this is what needs to happen. But I do think that there are some other issues that a lot of church congregations can get behind. Like, we've done some workshops around food security, specifically partnering with the Canadian Food Grains Bank, talking about how it's important that the government keep their commitments to foreign aid that they've made decades ago and continue to do that. So I feel like, at least for CRC churches, it's pretty easy to get them behind those kind of ideas. But yeah, you start talking about climate change in Alberta, and you're probably going to have differing opinions, and that's fine. I actually learned when I created this workshop that people are sometimes going to want to advocate about stuff that I disagree with, and then I feel conflicted because I'm like, oh, I created this monster, and now people are going to go advocate for things that I don't think they should be. But it's here as an opportunity for people to actually share about their convictions and share their views with the government, which I think is what we're called to do, to speak out and bear witness about the things that we are passionate about and that we care about. To answer the first question, I would say, for those who feel like they just don't know enough, there is a section that Melissa's going to get to talk about the need to do more research when people feel like they're not really knowledgeable. But I would also say I usually do this workshop as a full day workshop. We've really shortened this down to make it into a 1-hour webinar. And when we do it in the full day, Margot and Bob both participated in that when I was in Edmonton a couple years ago. We take time to sit and actually discuss and research and bring, the knowledge of the people around the table in to share about that particular issue. So we really encourage people, if you are passionate about a particular issue, if you're passionate about affordable housing, human trafficking, climate change, whatever it is, if you aren't an expert on it yet, do the research it takes to learn as much as you can. You don't have to be an expert, but to learn as much as you can to be a competent advocate on the issue. And if there are about 14 different justice areas that I focus on within the CRC, I know that not every person in a church is going to be passionate about all 14 issues. Some people pick one or two, So if your number one issue about that you're passionate about is climate change, then yeah, do the research and do the work to be able to be a competent advocate. But if you care about refugees, but it's not the number one thing that you focus on, it's fine. Send an action alert when it comes across from our offices and our newsletters or things like that. And that's good advocacy to be doing too. It doesn't mean that you have to be an expert on every single area of justice to be able to be a good advocate. Does that make sense? Melissa, do you have stuff to add?
I think what I have to add about that fits well with outlining the fourth paragraph in the closing.
Okay, well then let's give one person an opportunity to share. Was anyone actually able to complete your call to action while we were all talking there? Does anyone want to take a stab at it? Of saying what you want your elected official to do?
I'm seeing lots of.
Just say one thing. Oh, sorry, I don't know who said. I think, and if I think about what I have been working on, and thanks, Lucinda, for raising that, and also for your response there, Cindy. So often, I think we have an emotional response to what we see or read in the media, or we could just be on CBC television or whatever it is. As I sat here trying to come up with, how I could state this well, I realized I needed to have better information so that it didn't just come like, I want you to do this because it's the best thing to do, right? So I do have a little bit more than that, but it's really, I think that it is valuable to do some work, and it's not impossible to do it. It's just, it does take time. And I think that is, it makes your voice a better voice.
Yeah, that's great. Melissa, do you want to go on with the fourth paragraph then?
Yeah. And to address like some of the concerns and questions that have come up already. So the fourth paragraph, as you see, is related to giving more specific stats, research, and statistics, other sources to help prove your point, to prove the need for the change that you are asking for. And it makes total sense to me that people will feel intimidated out of writing a letter because of this component, right? So be encouraged that technically your letter could stop after the third paragraph, because your elected officials, at least this is in the US context, your elected officials are not expecting you to be the level of an expert about that issue as much as the folks in the think tank down the street in Washington, D.C. that research this stuff all the time. But they need to be hearing from you specifically as their constituent. That carries a lot of weight. That carries, in a lot of ways, it carries more weight than the person in the think tank who knows all the stats, because you are who votes for them, and you are the one with the passion and the person that is seeing the effects of these things on the ground. So I just wanted to say that as an encouragement and as something to help folks not feel deterred by this process just because they are not content experts. But if you do feel like you have some more expertise or numbers or research to point to or offer, please do write this paragraph. There's also an option to even write a one-page brief if you're feeling particularly ambitious, that you could include with your letter. And you could also talk about, if you know where your elected official has stood on this particular issue in the past, you could address that in this paragraph as well. But again, this is, that's kind of like getting in the weeds, and that requires knowing where your elected official has stood. It requires knowing the different nuances of the issue and the different sides of it and where your elected official stands. But again, I just want to encourage, as someone that has sat down and met with constituents on behalf of a member of Congress, that your passion and your on-the-ground experience with seeing the impacts firsthand, that means a lot. And you don't have to be the content expert, because members of Congress or members of Parliament do have those think tank folks they can turn to in order to get the stats necessary to back up the asks that their constituency is asking for. But again, don't let that stop you from writing your own brief and including your own research, because I know some of us love to do that sort of thing. And it does bolster your case and your points that you are trying to make to help you be taken more seriously. So yeah, I don't know if, well, we're not making time for you to write that part because that obviously would take a good chunk of time, but just for the closing paragraph, you'll want to, you'll want to thank them, first of all, to thank them for their time. Thank you for serving in the legislature and for their work on this issue, and also to invite them to get back in contact with you and to set a time frame for that, maybe like a month time frame or something along those lines, so that you open up the door for you reaching back out to them to say like, hey, I sent this letter a month ago and I'm wondering if there's been any progress on it, if the legislator has had any opportunity to make some changes on this particular topic that I wrote them about. So, and then you're done, and then you mail it. Just so quick and easy, right? So we will move into, so we know that was a lot of information, but we want to move into any like final tips and final Q&A that folks might have, so. And Cindy is on mute.
The mute button is right behind my camera, so it's hard to see it.
Oh.
So yeah, so we'll just add a couple tips here quickly, and then after that you can answer or ask questions as we go. So I will say specifically the most important tip, again, is that if you are in Canada, sending mail to your MP in Ottawa is free. So you just put it in the mailbox, no stamp is required. But if you are sending it to provincial or municipal offices, unfortunately a stamp is required. I would say it is very likely that your message will be responded to from a staff assistant, and that's fine. That's normal. Don't be offended by that. Melissa, do you want to share more about what your experience of that is?
Yeah, sure. So members of Congress or members of Parliament have their own staff that handle different issue area portfolios. So if you decide to write to your member of Parliament about climate change, then it is likely the staffer that handles climate and environmental issues that will be the one reading that letter. And so don't be discouraged by that fact. That's actually a really good thing, because it's sort of the member's content expert then that is reading this and passing along the information to the member themselves. So yeah, be encouraged when staff are the ones that you get your engagement with. That's okay.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like Melissa just said in the last section, follow up to get a response, because sometimes they don't automatically send you a response, especially if you don't clearly ask for one in your message. So follow up within a month via phone or email to get a response. Sometimes people are just really busy, especially now during the pandemic. People are trying to figure out new rhythms of working. So that's just something you can do rather than just being like, they never wrote back. What was the point? You know, like always follow up to see if they have a response and ask them to respond. And then I would say also it's really important to plan your next steps. Hopefully this is the first step in a long-term relationship with your elected official, where you will continue to communicate with them about justice issues that matter to you. We really encourage you again to meet with them in person in the future if that's possible. That is one of the most effective ways. People, you know, if you go to all the trouble of actually scheduling a meeting and showing up and talking about the issues you care about, that shows a real commitment to the justice issue that matters to you, and that will really make an impression on your elected official or the staffers that you might meet with. And then we would say we would also love to hear from you. If you send your letter out and you get a response, we'd love to have you copy that to us so we can see what kind of communication you're having with elected officials. And if you want our help, if you want help briefing on some of the justice issues that we focus on, like Indigenous justice or refugees or climate, feel free to get in touch with us at publicdialogue@crcna.org, or chat us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, Melissa, any final thoughts?
If so, I have to bounce off for another Zoom call, but if anyone has a particular question that I could answer, or that I could potentially answer, please post that, but otherwise I would have to go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you
Okay.
all.
Yeah,
And
all right, so I'm gonna bounce off, but that doesn't mean that you all have to. So please aim your questions at Cindy, and thank you, everybody. Nice to meet you.
thanks, Melissa. It was great having you.
Bye.
Thank you. Yes.
And yeah, I know this was a really fast sort of rush through, trying to keep it to an hour. I think I've learned webinars might need to be an hour and a half to fully get through content. But hopefully you have all of the information that you need to be able to do this well and feel confident doing it. If you are actually going to write letters after this, like if you take time later this afternoon or even this evening or tomorrow or later this week, I'd love to know, and just let me know what you're sending and what you're advocating about, just because it's great to know that these webinars are effective. So yeah, feel free to let me know how that works. Let me know if you want any support on research or further information. I'm sure our Indigenous Ministry Committee has information about boil water advisories or about the foster care system and the disproportionate amount of Indigenous youth in those systems. So if that's something that you want to learn more about, Bob, I'm sure our Climate Witness Project folks would love to chat further about climate care, but you do sound like you've got it covered. But yeah, we would love to hear from you. And Lucinda, I'd love to hear from you too about how this can be effective for deacons and if there are other opportunities to share this information with deacons. So yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you all for being here today. Do you have any final questions or?
Cindy, one question. Is it better to write an actual letter with a stamp on it or to email?
I would say that an actual letter in the mail might get more notice. It doesn't necessarily have to be handwritten, because if I did that, no one would be able to read it because I have chicken scratch writing. But I usually, if I'm really wanting to have an impact, I'll type it up, print it off, and put it in the mailbox, because I feel like that just that extra effort is noticed. Now, obviously, using up a bunch of paper is almost counterproductive if we're talking about climate care, but you choose your battles. And that's, again, not to say that if all you have time for, if your kids are running around the house and you're busy, but you have an email drafted and you want to just hit send on the email, that's fine. And you can expect a response to that too. You can follow up and say, hey, I sent an email, why didn't you respond? That's fine too. I think in my career doing this work, I've probably sent just as many emails as I've sent, typed letters in the mail. And it's about 50-50 as to how many get responded to anyways, right? So, but it's the personalization of it, I think, that matters the most. We really do believe our action alert system is valuable, but that's, again, if you've got 5 minutes, send an action alert. If you've got half an hour, draft a letter and write it. If you've got, an afternoon, book a meeting with your MP and go meet them in person. There's a lot of different ways that you can have an impact based on how much time you have to devote to these issues. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here and learning with us today. And this has been a great learning experience for me too. So thanks for your help. Thanks for inviting us to do this,
Thank you
Margot.
very much. Yes, more to talk about and more to do. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye. Okay, bye-bye. Have a great rest of your day. See you.